honestly, now that the season is done, I just don't think it was worth it. I mean, I know some of you said, I saw when we were doing the live stream today, before we started, some of you said that you really enjoyed this finale, and then it pulled you back in, and I'm very happy for you. Although I don't think you're getting a season 2. We'll see. I mean, Star Wars is a glutton for punishment these days. But I wouldn't say that you should give in to the toxic hate, but I think there are certainly ways to not invite it. From choices that are made, but to the strongest of all, by making actually really good content that the other side can fight for. I just feel that this series ultimately became not something that was defensible. Again, some of you think that it is. But at the end of the day, it was almost like it was just manufactured for all the hate. Like as a challenge, which is weird because it's a show about Sith. It was like, yes, let the hate flow through you. But you're like, oh, is that intentional? I mean, I'm just so disappointed. And the ratings are very poor. It's not like this is some great battle for the future of Star Wars that's being fought over here. No one cares. It's, it's unfortunate. Now, I think at the end of the day, this ended up being just yet another tease, which has become a particular problem. Hollywood's suffering from this overall. Kevin Costner, you teased with your Horizon 1. It's poor. I liked that movie, and I'm excited for Horizon 2 if I ever get to see it. But Disney Plus in particular, with their Marvel and Star Wars content, shows, and even a lot of their movies lately, we've been saying this. We always end up watching what amounts to an ad for the next installment, be it the next season or the follow-up movie. And we're like, then why did you make me watch this? The only moment that I thought was cool in the season finale was when Osha went over to the dark side. I told you what Saul did was really bad. Saul Jedi training, 0 stars on Yelp, turned me evil. But yes, we all guessed that to kill without a weapon meant the Force choke. A lot of things that we guessed came true, but I feel they didn't feel like it wasn't satisfactory to see them realized, because they were realized in such a poor way that you were like, who cares at this point? But yeah, it was a Force choke, and Amanda Stenberg looked cool doing it. I'm going to say it later, but I'll say it now. She looked like she was entirely dressed by Zara. And I got to tell you, I liked her look a little bit, but it just seems so modern. This is a show that's supposed to take place so long ago. And it feels like current Star Wars. And it certainly doesn't feel like hundreds of years earlier. I mean, I'm surprised when they were doing the costume design for the show, nobody brought that up. And they were like, it looks like the current characters could walk right in here. We'll talk about Yoda and Darth Plagueis. Darth Plagueis, of course, not being a current character. But anyway. But what we didn't expect was to see what's called bleeding. Oh, that was cool. When a Sith turns a Jedi's kyber crystal red, pouring all their dark emotions into it, corrupting the crystal. I kind of liked that. So that Osha is becoming a Sith. She's going to become a Sith who will wield the corrupted lightsaber of the Jedi who wronged her, killed her mother, and turned her to the dark side. Oh, that's pretty nice. I'd be like, that's downright freaking poetic. I thought that was good. And considering what was done to Osha, I do believe she was wronged the most. So she kind of got a happy ending, like sort of, right? Like she's sort of a Jedi. I mean, it's pretty close. She's got all the accoutrement, right? She gets to wield a lightsaber. And it's almost like a Sith or a combination of the Jedi that she had always wanted to be and the love from her mother's coven. It's like she's honoring both in some kind of twisted way. And I kind of like that. But how is Osha the most powerful between the two? Like as a child, May was clearly the one who was more powerful. I mean, maybe Osha is the most powerful when it comes to being a Sith because she has the most hate, anger, and sadness. And that's just freaking beautiful, man. I mean, I like that. There's more to discuss about this episode, and we will, but I think the big question that everybody wants to know now is, do we want a season 2? I mean, I just said I kind of liked some of the stuff that happened with Osha. But I have to say I would not greenlight a season 2. I mean, the ratings are in the crapper. There's your answer right there. I'm like, I'm not giving you another $200 million. You didn't deliver. But anyway, also, the only way I would do a season 2, if I was tempted, if I was like, I do like the dark side, if I would totally replace the creative team. I'd be like, these characters are coming back, but none of you people behind the camera are. And would that upset the few fans that the show has left? So nobody would be happy, right? Like, I'd be like, maybe I'll take Osha and Qimir and whoever else they're hanging out with and give them to somebody else to play with. But to what end? Also, these characters are so far in the past. Like, they're during the High Republic. So I can never really use them unless I invent, well, they do seem to have time travel, right? I mean, who knows in today's Disney Star Wars? But I can't use them with the rest of the Star Wars characters. So I really don't understand the point of building out. I know that this is Star Wars' new thing. They don't have they can't build it out into different, they could though, like Marvel has played with genres. But for some reason, Star Wars has decided to build out the timeline. I think that's dumb. It's not working for them. I don't want to go this far in the past. I think prequels are complicated. And also Star Wars just keeps repeating itself. You're like, we went back hundreds of years. And it's pretty much the same. Just like they went into the future. And you're like, wait a minute, it's still the rebels versus the Empire? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, so why did we leave where we were, man? Let's just flush that out. Let's just, I guess they're going to just, I would say just stick to the Filoni-verse. But a lot of people don't seem to like the Filoni-verse. The ratings are a little soft there. I mean, they're not as bad as this, but they're not much better. So I'd be tempted just to totally start from scratch and just be like, I just close the door on all this and be like, that was interesting. Let's go find some new Jedi and Sith. Because, Qimir was so exciting for one episode. So, or 2, actually, when you count the end of episode 4, when he floated down like a little dark angel. He got so uncool this episode. It was kind of like, when you think you're dating this cool guy and then suddenly you realize you're not. It's kind of like that. All right, so yeah. So yeah, I saw the back of Yoda's head. But dude, keep Yoda out of this shit. Don't leave Yoda alone. Poor Yoda, he doesn't need this. And we've already got Grogu. How hard is Disney Star Wars going to lean on these little guys? And this show, by the way, I have to agree with some of you. Now that it's over, it really did taint the idea of the Jedi. And for what? Why did we do it? Like, David Harewood finally showed up as the senator who's no fan of the Jedi, and he made some valid points. I thought it was particularly damaging when he compared the Jedi to one of those sketchy churches that don't pay taxes. I was like, they should pay taxes. Because the truth is, I don't think the show put forward one admirable Jedi. They were either corrupted, lame, or, I'm sorry to say, just nothing special. I mean, I too thought that Yord and Jeki's deaths were incredible, but that was just their deaths. What was really special about them as Jedi? I mean, I feel bad saying it because I know some of you were fans of them, and I thought they had potential. But when you look back, there's nothing special. And then you add to that how Obi-Wan was watered down, Luke Skywalker. So, I mean, he had that one cool moment at the end of Mandalorian season 2, right? Or Boba Fett or something. But then he got lame. And then Ahsoka, they sucked out all of her personality. And then Ezra. Oh, I was so excited when he showed up, but he wasn't given anything to do. It's really unfortunate. I really support the idea of broadening who is a Jedi. But now we've crossed over into the idea that anyone can be a Jedi. That's not true. I think I think that you don't know who's going to be a Jedi, but just, it's not just filling out the application. So I guess I want to see diversity in the ranks of the Jedi, but it still needs to be a calling. It still needs to only be for the special few. But the special few is not, any group could put forward a candidate, I guess is the way to say it. I was totally cool and in fact excited about the idea of a few bad Jedi who had been spectacularly corrupted. This was just lame. Like one of you again guessed, I loved it, the idea of the 4 horsemen of the Sith. Jedi, again, as I said, who have been spectacularly corrupted. But then how do you explain Vernestra? She's awful. And what's the point, by the way, of making Qimir her fallen Jedi Padawan? I'm sorry to say she's not even a good character. So why? I mean, I'm sorry because I know some of you like this show still. But like, why would I want more of her? I'm like, oh, thank goodness Vernestra's coming back. Not. I'm like, oh man, we can't replace her. We can't have like somebody else brought in from corporate. Like, she's no Michael Scott of the Jedi. Thank you very much. I just really don't like the character. And in fact, the connection to Qimir, even though we all guessed it, when they made it real this episode, made me think less of Qimir. The Jedi have just been turned into any old type of poorly run organization instead of the special one that they once were. They aren't even turned evil in a special way. Then, speaking of special, we still don't understand what is so special about Osha and May. Like, if there's anything we should have had settled by the end of the season, it should have been that. As some of you correctly guessed, they are not even the Force Virgins themselves. But Mother Anastasia simply used the Force Virgins on that planet to create them, splitting a single life into 2. Where did the single life come from? Are they a clone of Anastasia? Did she somehow combine her life force with Coral's to have literally 2 moms? Like, did they have a Jedi? I mean, do they have or any kind of donor? I don't I thought I liked it when they were the Force Virgins, but now I'm just like, okay, keep going. And then they're like, no. But even if you don't talk about the parentage of Osha and May, but this is Star Wars. Parentage is kind of a big deal, right? Because they follow the lines of these families through these hundreds of years, centuries. But just the idea of why did Mother Anastasia want to split a life force into 2? Why? What's the benefit of that? Still not explained. Is the show trying to say that we all have a little good and bad in us? Except if you separate it into 2 individuals and then one's good and one's bad? But then why at the end of the show did they switch who was good and who was bad? So it doesn't make any sense. It's so frustrating. One of the only things that really would have brought this home for me, where I would have been like, okay, we have to continue, would be if Osha and May had combined back into one individual at the end of the season. I would have been like, oh, that's crazy, man. We got to keep going. But no, they just literally switched places, which is very frustrating to me because I'm like, man, I do not want to do this again. Like, it's so hard to discuss this show now that it's ended because it's such a mess. I know a lot of you will be like, it was a mess from the beginning. I didn't think so. I could see maybe where they were going, but then they didn't go there. But storylines and emotional through lines are now just so hopelessly knotted that, you know, it's hard to compartmentalize what's going on even on the show. You're like, oh, but now that bleeds into that and that. I mean, and not in a good way. You're like, this is just a mess. Why did May suddenly want Saul to face justice for his crimes instead of death? Why couldn't she go with Qimir and Osha and they all trained together? Although we'll talk about the rule of 2 in a moment. Star Wars forgetting its own damn rules. But no, those things didn't make any sense. And now Vernestra is going to use May to hunt down Osha, like Saul used Osha to hunt down May. I mean, there is a duality, but then there's also just repeating your damn storyline and making us have to sit through it again. I don't want to do that. And May, why would she turn on her sister like that? Like, again, they're like, oh, and also, if you wipe someone's mind down to when they were 8, wouldn't that, like, emotionally bring them back down to that age? Like, she just doesn't remember, but she's still, I'm like, there should be bigger ramifications than that. Like, it just didn't make any sense. It just didn't work. And then, so May, and again, the sisters aren't getting along, and you're like, oh, man, again, we worked so hard to get them back together. And it's as easy as Pip being turned to a different side. That Pip boy. What happened to Star Wars droids, man? The droids that I know would have fought that reboot, that system reboot. Because then otherwise, what have we been doing all this time getting to falling in love with droids? Right? Like, shouldn't they have their personalities on a backup file somewhere or on the cloud? Like, this reminds me of Terminator. This whole time, should we have just been looking for the system reboot button on the Terminators? You're like, grab his neck and touch his thumb and he's going to totally reboot. It's going to be great. Back to factory settings, baby. Like, why didn't we think about that with Terminator? I mean, that just blows my mind. But yeah, I'm not too happy about what happened with Pip. All right, let's talk about the Sith. So yeah, I also saw Darth Plagueis in there. Or is it Darth Tenebris? I feel like it could have been either one, to be honest with you, because they were in the shadows. But everyone's saying it's Plagueis, so we'll just go with Plagueis. I mean, we got so little, who cares? But no matter who it is, we know it's the Sith, right? So what is this next season? What would it be? Survivor Sith Edition? Because there's only allowed to be 2 at a time. Now, for those of you who don't know the rule of 2, it came about after the Sith massacre during the Old Republic. So there was the Old Republic, and there used to be a ton of Sith, and the Jedi, I guess back when they were not on the defense, killed all of them. So they wanted to keep the Sith around, so they said, whew, boy, we are not popular. So we should only have 2 at a time so we can be in hiding. A master who will represent the dark side and teach it to an apprentice who craves that power. And eventually the apprentice kills the master, becomes the new master, and then gets an apprentice to start the cycle all over again. I don't know who would sign up for said cycle, but they don't seem to have a problem with recruitment. All right, so especially after they found a way to repurpose them with the Rise of Skywalker. All right, so what's going to happen here? Like, we can't have 3 Sith on that island. You can't even have 2 sets of 2 with, like Tenebris and Plagueis are like, should we invite them over for dinner? We can have couple friends. I love it. Maybe I do want a season 2, but they never give me what I want. All right. All right. So anyway, why didn't they even at least use the rule of 2 to be why May couldn't come over with them? Be like, we'd love to have you come with us, May, but there can only be 2. So you're going to have to go find something else to do. I'm sorry. So mean. But I guess that's what the Sith are like. And also, what are we going to have here? A Sith Bonnie and Clyde? I'd be more into it if, again, they didn't look like an ad for Zara. And as I said, this was a tough episode for Qimir. Like, I think he's a night villain. His look doesn't work during the day. You're like, ooh, who turned the lights on? You do not look good in the daylight. Also, as I said, not only was the fact that he was Vernestra's former Padawan, but the fact that he was still so shaken by her. I was like, you're afraid of that lady? I mean, I know she whipped you with her lightsaber, but I mean, like, I feel I could take Vernestra, and I'm a regular human. David Harewood was certainly taking care of her. So I think I do not like this pairing. I think it hurts the character of Qimir. As for this episode's big lightsaber battle, a little too much wire work. I was like, we've gone full Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I don't like it. I don't know how we got into ballet. And they stripped out the inventiveness that Qimir showed in his first battle. Also, a lack of Force use. He was using the Force all over the place that first time. Really, again, it's the bloom is off the rose of this date. I mean, there was a little Force use to use like the way they usually do, just to get their lightsabers back. And then also, Saul did like a little cloud to fling off the lightsabers. I'm like, why don't you take control of the sabers? But he didn't. And also instead of going for the kill strike, he just cut Qamir's blade, and you're like, whatever. I guess now you go on back to defense. Like, they made such a big deal about how Jedi only fight defensively, but yet finally one decided to go on offense. And I don't really feel like it made that much of a difference. I wasn't like, oh, now you've done it. Saul is in attack mode. I was like, it looks a lot like all of Saul. It looks worse than Saul's defense mode. He was more effective as a fighter in defense. It wasn't as good as the Indara versus May fight or Saul versus May. It felt like the other Disney Star Wars battles, instead of the fierce precision that we've seen on the Acolyte so far, and one of the few things that I thought has really set it apart. So that was disappointing that it didn't end with a battle that matched its earlier ones. Also, after the great sell of that Cortosis helmet and how it connects you directly to the Force, I did like when Osha did that weird like horror movie and I was like, ooh, that was cool, right? But I felt it didn't, and also Qamir's eyes turned black, just like with the Coven again. But they didn't explain that either. You're like, whatever, you guys. It's like when you're playing with someone and they keep going like, oh, my force field was up. Oh, you didn't actually get me. And you're like, I don't want to play with you anymore. You're just making this shut up as you go along. All right. So anyway, I don't feel that the Cortosis helmet made enough of a difference in this fight. It just became a weird fashion choice. You're like, that helmet makes you look funny, man. Like in the daylight. Like even he didn't even have his cortosis gauntlet. Like he was using that in such creative ways in his first fight. And then here it was just your typical lightsaber battle. Speaking of helmets, this one did not fit May. Why didn't they fix that? I was like, that looks comically bad. However, it was a nice idea to have her try to hide in the rings of that planet. That was very pretty. I was like, oh, it reminds me of Ad Astra, which I thought was a good movie. So it was visually stunning, but then it was also kind of scary when Saul, so hell-bent on getting her, went all Cruella de Vil and was like driving into the ring. He was like, I'm going to get you. But then Basil tore up the controls. Was Basil afraid of crashing or something? That just annoyed me. And I thought Saul didn't lose his temper enough at Basil. He should have been like, you crazy beaver, what are you doing? It was crazy. It was, again, I was just like, why are you still in this story? Forget being on the ship. But finally, I would like to clarify that while I definitely fell out of love with this show, I still really think that the lead actors did a phenomenal job. I think that Lee Jung-jae and Manny Jacinto did fantastic work, and that Amanda Stenberg, who really was unfortunately put through the ringer because of this show, that's just so unfair in my opinion, because I think that she was just ethereal. I think she did incredible work playing two very different characters. She totally sold me on herself as twins. And then also I thought she looked stunning inside and out. I think she's a wonderful actress, really dynamic. And once again, Star Wars did not look after its talent. I'd say that this has been a problem in particular for its actors of color, but yet look how Rey was mishandled. Kylo Ren, Obi-Wan. Like the ideas have promise. I think Star Wars comes up with good ideas, Disney Star Wars, but the execution is consistently bad. And sometimes it's really bad. And I think we're all getting tired of promises for another day that almost always these days ultimately become empty or are revealed to be empty promises. So, I was so excited, for instance, with Ahsoka, with the return of these iconic characters from Rebels. And it just it never materialized. They again leave you saying like, well, maybe in season 2. And that's just, I'm so tired of watching these series and seeing the episodes and the minutes count down and, being so nervous. Like, I think we all have that feeling of like, do you have enough time left to do what needs to be done? And the answer is always no. So it's just really frustrating. So, what do you think? Again, as I said, I know some of you did like this episode, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. But for me, after, again, falling for really good, promising promises, but that they ended up being empty, I just feel really let down and really badly burned because it was really tough defending this show. Not even defending it. Well, I guess I defended it a little bit, but just saying I liked it. It was brutal. And I feel like I backed up Star Wars, but Star Wars didn't back up me. And it was tough. It was really, really tough. So I hope that we can get this right because I did enjoy elements of the show as we talked about. All right, so what do you think? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.